When making his 1984 music video, Julian Lennon attempted to use home videos. The legal team representing Yoko Ono swiftly obstructed it, and that was only the start. She was in charge of all things related to John Lennon's name for a long time. Julian spent years and millions of dollars fighting back in court twice, but something happened in 1998 that ruined him entirely. Yoko refused to tell him anything about the $20 million she lost on the estate's disastrous investments, but he eventually found out. What John truly said before he passed away and why Julian would never forgive her are both revealed today. The infant Julian Charles John Lennon entered this world at 6:50 a.m. on April 8, 1963 at Liverpool's Septon General Hospital. His weight was 8 pounds and a half. The Beatles, who were his dad's band, had their #1 single, Please, Please Me, that very week. John was absent. When his wife Cynthia went into labor, he was performing a club in London. Manager Brian Epstein was Julian's godfather 3 weeks later. There was a photo op with the infant dressed as a prop for the Beatles when the press arrived. John allegedly said, "Who's going to look after it?" Upon seeing his son for the first time, "Not at all. It alone, not my son." Under the radar, Cynthia changed John's occupation on his birth certificate from Beatle to musician. Nothing changed. Fans found their house within months, forcing them to put up gates. Julia, John's mother, was killed in a vehicle accident when he was 17 years old. Julian is named for her. His paternal grandfather gave him the middle name Charles. It made John unhappy. "I didn't want to make this compromise," he wrote to his Aunt Mimi in 1964. In 2012, same letter fetched 28,000 at auction. John confessed to a bigger crime years later. Too much booze in a hotel room led to Julian's conception. He was not anticipated. People didn't want him. Epstein stepped in with money to keep the family together. Tony Barrow, a press officer for the Beatles, recalled once, adding that John even pondered adoption. Having a child at the young age of 22 was John's worst decision, he told a therapist afterwards. During a photo shoot at Abbey Road, the Beatles had 6-month-old Julian laid on a blanket. For a photo that appeared in publications all across the globe, the band members gathered around him. John gave the infant a sidelong glance. An unpublished photo showed him grimacing as he held Julian firmly. In between flashes, Cynthia was the one who calmed him down. Unauthorized appearances by Julian in 34 Beatles. Related publications had already occurred by the time he turned 1, since children do not have legal rights to their own likeness. The court rejected Cynthia's attempt to sue the magazine. Julian didn't say "Mama" or "Dada" until he was 18 months old. The Beatles. The recordings were playing continuously in his ears. At random people who were playing guitar, he would shout "Day" while pointing to the TV. He would stand at the window every night at 6 o'clock, hoping that John would return home. Uncommonly, he did. If Julian's dad wasn't in the car, he'd yell, but if someone else was, he'd cry. According to a neighbor who saw him afterward, the sound of Jay's voice on the radio was more familiar to him than his face when he was 2 years old. Cynthia expressed her heartbreak in her writing. All John could say in response to the news was, "He'll get over it." Throughout 1965, John created images of Julian. He drew small cartoons in more than 20 notebooks. Julian accompanied by guitars and sporting a mop-top hairdo. But they only spent 11 days together that year. John had been using heroin and was frequently distant, even over supper, according to Cynthia's housekeeper's journal. Pictured with a syringe in one drawing was 21-year-old Julian. A biographer referred to it as a terrifying prophecy years later. The drawings were discovered by Cynthia in 1967. John clarified to her that it was merely a form of black comedy. During a legal dispute over the estate in 1996, the notebooks that had been concealed for so long made a triumphant return. According to 1970 court documents, John informed Cynthia that Julian's arrival was too early for his rock and roll world. John exhibited symptoms of narcissistic parenting. According to the psychologist who testified against him, he prioritized his work and himself before his child. According to those in the know, John debated sending Julian to boarding school when he was 2 years old. After Cynthia threatened to inform the media, they shelved the plan. While the Beatles were meditating in India, John informed Paul that Julian was a result of his past actions. In a subsequent interview, Paul verified it. That wasn't mentioned to Julian until much later. It broke his heart. John met Yoko Ono at a tiny art show in November 1966. On exhibit was an empty canvas, and John paid 5 shillings to have a nail driven into it. A chain reaction began with that one deed, and the family was eventually torn apart. John began calling Yoko in the middle of the night as Cynthia slept within a few weeks. 14 visits to Yoko's studio had passed by January 1967. Love letters were discovered by Cynthia by spring. Julian accompanied the Beatles for filming the Magical Wonder tour when he was 4 years old. When she confronted him, he simply responded, "I've found my soulmate." As they sat down, he was given chocolates and the opportunity to play with drumsticks by Ringo Starr. John, engrossed in his phone conversation with Yoko, hardly glanced his way. Yoko called him 17 times during the 2 days of filming, according to Cynthia. John hurled a camera out the window during one of their fights. It was just inches away from Julian's head. Everyone on board recalled John saying to Cynthia, "She understands me better than you ever will." Julian remained firmly attached to Ringo throughout. According to his subsequent statement, Ringo was more of a father that week than John had ever been. Julian brought home a crayon painting from nursery school in March 1967. The universe centers on a young girl called Lucy. When John inquired as to what it was, Julian revealed, "It's Lucy in the sky with diamonds." Later that evening, John composed one of the most iconic songs by the Beatles. However, John played up the drug rumors when reporters inquired about the title. He rejected the idea that had given rise to his son's creativity. Reading a fan magazine many years later was the only way Julian learned the truth. John remarked in an interview, "My son doesn't understand what I created from his childish scribble." Decades later, the girl from the painting confirmed it, but John never acknowledged her. In November 1968, John initiated the divorce process. Although the legal documents placed the responsibility on irretrievable breakdown, the small fraction of Jay's millions went to Cynthia's legal team, who secured a 100,000 settlement plus 2,400 per annum in child support. Julian had 2 encounters with John over the 6-week procedure. The initial incident occurred when John violently broke a guitar while arguing for custody. On the second occasion, they celebrated Christmas together for 30 minutes under supervision. Outside in the Rolls-Royce, Yoko waited. According to John's attorney, his client wanted very little interaction with Julian. According to what Cynthia said in court, John once said, "Julian reminds me of my failures." That same year, on April 8 when Julian turned 6, John and Yoko were in Montreal for a bid-in for peace. He sent a telegram that read, "Happy birthday, Jules. Sorry, busy with peace. Love, Dad." Instead of turning up, it arrived after the party had ended. 3 days later, Cynthia stated that Julian wept. John neglected to contact his kid, even once during the 134 interviews he gave that week. It was later revealed by an Apple Corps assistant that John had originally written a longer note, but Yoko had persuaded him to cut it down. Also, telegrams were sent to celebrate the following 3 birthdays. There will be no phone calls or in-person meetings. John told many people during the divorce that Julian was only my biological son and not my biological son-in-law. In the face of Yoko's pregnancy, John wholeheartedly supported her daughter from a prior marriage. During an interview with Playboy in 1980, a few weeks prior to Jay's death, the worst part happened. He said that his son Sean from his marriage to Yoko was the actual one, and that Julian was just a Saturday night fling, adored, desired, and planned from the start. Around the time he turned 17, Julian came across that. He was deeply affected by it. Yoko then used that interview as an excuse to give Sean a larger portion of the bequest, 50 million instead of 20 million, from Julian. Even though he had the "no-trial son" phrase on audio, John's brother-in-law admitted to hearing it multiple times. Atlantic Records extended a contract to 18-year-old Julian Lennon in the spring of 1981. He started off with some rudimentary demos he made in Weybridge on a home 4-track task setup. Tony Dimitriadis, the producer, detected something in those unfinished recordings. Julian quickly found himself at George Martin's AIR Studios in Montserrat, recording his debut album Veloute. Session fees were high, with a 12-member gospel choir aiming for the rich, full sound that Phil Spector made famous. The production was big and cost 400,000. Julian Lennon hid out in his mother Cynthia's rural home after his father John Lennon's murder. And it was there that he composed the song Valet. The lyrics conveyed a sense of being alone. He was forced to do 47 takes of the title track's vocals by producer Phil Ron during recording. Memories of John's critical comments caused Julian to cry at one occasion. It took 8 months to mix the record. A total of 156 revisions were reviewed and approved by Julian himself. Atlantic bet $1.2 million on the Lennon legacy because they saw enormous potential. October 17th was the release date of the album. With first week sales of 143,000 copies, it broke the previous record for a solo debut by a British artist that year and debuted at number 17 on the Billboard 200. With over 1 million copies sold and 2.4 million copies sold worldwide, it achieved platinum status in the US by December. Too Late for Goodbyes increased its position on the Billboard Hot 100 to number 5. Despite Yoko Ono's legal threats, Julian directed the song video himself, utilizing childhood footage that Cynthia had given him. That November, MTV aired the video 47 times. His voice sounded eerily similar to Jay's, according to some. According to Rolling Stone, it was described as carrying the genius gene. As the year came to a close, Julian's royalties totaled $780,000. The initiative brought in a total of $3.8 million for Atlantic. He was up for Best New Artist at the 1985 Grammys in February, but Sade took home the trophy. Things escalated behind the scenes. After Julian criticized Madonna's song, Material Girl Vapid, in Smash Hits, the singer confronted him. She said he was living it up thanks to his famous father. Security had to intervene when he retaliated with gunfire and yelling. For 3 days, news outlets covered the fight. There was speculation of a reaction against the Lennon name in the industry after Julian's loss, even though his record outsold Sade's by 340,000 copies in the US. From Boston, Julian set out on his North American tour in April 1985. Quickly, the tickets were sold. In just 18 minutes, the Roxy Theater reached capacity. He went on to play 38 gigs in 32 places over the course of the following 2 months, earning $2.1 million. However, he became hoarse in Detroit on May 28. Acute laryngitis was the diagnosis made by the medical team. A total of 11 performances were postponed, with Madison Square Garden being one of them, resulting in a refund of $670,000. There was an admission from Julian's tour manager that he smoked 2 packs of cigarettes daily and drank whiskey before performances. Night after night, he battled to imitate his father's singing style. He described his experience as chasing a ghost. In his private tour diaries, John had similar struggles in the 1970s when he was dealing with issues related to his voice. Released that summer, Say You're Wrong reached number 21 on the charts thanks to Julian. The 120,000 music video recorded in Malibu over the course of 3 days featured Elle Macpherson. Rumors of an affair between the two caught the attention of the British tabloids. Even though they denied any personal involvement, the media speculated about their romance for more than 2 weeks. There was a 35% decline in weekly sales for the single. This media whirlwind was Atlantic's fault. It didn't stop Julian from donating half of his $2.3 million that year, $1.15 million, to cystic fibrosis research in honor of a boyhood friend. The news scarcely mentioned it. While Phil Harding, the engineer, was mixing in August 1985, he found a tape labeled Julian 1979. It included 4 unreleased John Lennon tracks, one of which was a cover of Beautiful Boy, with different lyrics concerning their troubled relationship. Julian took instant possession of them, but Yoko Ono's attorneys barred access to them 3 days later, claiming ownership violations stemming from John's Dakota flat. A secret settlement was reached after a legal battle that had previously cost $250,000 in expenses. Julian accused Yoko of erasing his history in a letter that was eventually released to The Guardian. The demonstrations are still hidden, and she never gave a public response. Achieving gold status in the US, Julian's second album, The Secret Value of Daydreaming, was released in early 1986. On Billboard, the song Sticky Around peaked at number 32. A sleek syntha was added to the album by producer Neil Dorfsman. The songwriting improved, but it couldn't match Valet's commercial success. The pressure was building as Julian toured Europe in 1986. Beatles song titles were shouted by fans. Reviewers ignored his music in favor of his surname, even though he was attempting to establish his own identity. It was a transitional period. In interviews, Julian started to talk frankly about the pressures of being a Lennon. Within the same year, he became a part of Mike Batt's musical adaptation of The Hunting of the Snark by Lewis Carroll as the Baker. It was a theatrically themed, ambitious, and eccentric project that achieved silver certification in the UK. For this part, Julian was able to let his imagination run wild, deviating from his signature pop rock style. Media attention remained focused on Julian's private life rather than his music, even though he had amassed considerable riches by 1987. The tabloids' association of his music with alleged relationships only added to his aggravation. I burned out because to the industry pressure and all the comparisons. His involvement in public life began to wane. His 1989 album Mr. Jordan had a rough go of it. To top the US charts, it reached number 87. With an improved performance, it reached number 18 in Australia. There, Now You're in Heaven became a gold single. Eric Clapton was a guest artist on a few songs. Critics lauded Julian's growing voice, but they felt the album was too polished. Production costs were over $800,000, however sales in the US only covered 25% of those costs. Julian was involved in a Ferrari accident on the PCH on March 15, 1990. He was going 70 miles when he ran into a concrete barrier. He suffered whiplash, damaged ribs, and a broken arm as a result of the collision. His 22-city tour was cancelled, costing him almost $500,000. While he was healing, he penned You're the One in response to hearing of his mother Cynthia's cancer scare. The single reached a peak of fair 68 on the Australian charts. Suiting ensued, and a settlement of $75,000 was reached. After his depression lifted, Julian acknowledged he'd been driving carelessly. In 1991, he started making a comeback. He received a $1.2 million advance when he was signed by Virgin Records. With the help of Saltwater, he dropped the environmental anthem Help Yourself, which peaked at number 6 in the UK and number 1 in Australia. Actual footage of dying dolphins was shown in the disturbing film. Virgin gave the World Wildlife Fund $100,000 of its profits. At Rio de Janeiro's Earth Summit, Julian even sang the song. It was his most successful single since Goodbye's Too Late. However, criticism ensued. Some Beatles fans protested his 1992 US tour, saying he was using his father's fame for personal gain. Protesters shouting, "Fraud," interrupted a concert in Chicago. Midway through Rebel King, Julian paused to deliver a 10-minute speech honoring his father, who was away at the time. Before Viral even existed, MTV had recorded the event, and it quickly became popular online. Despite a subsequent 40% increase in album sales, the tour nonetheless lost $300,000 as a result of ticket cancellations caused by security concerns. Concurrently, Julian's experimental album Photograph Smile sparked a heated dispute with Virgin. The label was more interested in his popular music than his jazz-influenced work. Therefore, they rejected him. The lag time was excruciating. Unfortunately, Julian's drinking got worse throughout this period. He came clean about his daily vodka consumption later on. After plunging his Porsche into a yacht club fence in Monaco in June 1994, he was detained for driving under the influence in that city. This person's blood alcohol content was 0.01%. For 8 weeks, he was a patient in a Swiss rehabilitation center. After getting sober, he lost focus on his career. It wasn't until 1998 that the album was released. He had filed a $10 million lawsuit against Yoko Ono in 1991. Julian was only left a $250,000 trust under John's bequest. His half, brother John Lennon, received an estate that was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. No matter how many songs that used samples of Julian's voice from when he was a kid, neither Hey Jude nor John's solo works gave him a dime. They settled out of court for about $20 million, and Jay's personal effects, including his guitar and the original Hey Jude lyrics, after an 18-month legal battle. Julian received an Academy Award nomination in 1995 for his composition Cole's Song, which was included in Mr. Holland's opus. This was the most pivotal moment for him in a long time. The film's central message resonated with me. When Julian's band went on tour in 1982, he dropped out of music school. Sitting next to Cynthia, he attended the Academy Awards. They also discussed John's decision to drop out of art school. Julian discovered a dead albatross entangled in trash on an Australian beach on July 12, 1998, 3 years later. It stuck with him. After hearing a tale from John in which the latter promised to bring a white feather as a symbol of his impending death, he established the White Feather Foundation. 10,000 trees were planted as the foundation's initial action. I have no interest in finding out how his song made money. Additional details were disclosed in his second lawsuit against Yoko later that year. According to court records, she lost a $20 million investing in a dairy farm. According to Julian, John had promised an equitable distribution of assets during their 1979 Bermuda vacation. He lost $800,000 due to the 3-year court battle. A little portion of the inheritance, $5 million, was the final amount they settled for in 1998. The forensic accountants demonstrated how Yoko used Jay's initial real estate holdings for risky investments. Tapes of John bemoaning his first son's abandonment were even in Julian's possession. There was a lot of medication, therapy, and depression during the Picture Grin sessions. On the anniversary of John's death, one song was written, Day After Day. It made note of the shooting's timing, which was 10:50 p.m. The album bombed even though they hired a famous producer and recorded it at Abbey Road. Its sales were a meager 18,000 units. He was dropped by the label. In 1998, Julian attempted an unusual collaboration with rapper Bald on a song titled All Alone. The album sold a meager 2,400 copies. Naomi Campbell's disastrous blind date happened around that time. It was said that she informed him, "You're not John Lennon." The tabloids were ecstatic. In the midst of the legal drama, Yoko's leaked emails came to light. Julian was branded as thankless by her. He retaliated by revealing John's regretful old letters. "My biggest failure was Julian," according to one. Another tape that got out was John complaining to Phil Spector about how paying for Julian was like paying a guilt tax. These private hurts manifested in a public way. Donations to Julian's organization surged once the stories gained widespread attention. Yoko and Sean, however, were never the same after that. For a long time, they remained silent. In 2003, $48,000 was the asking price at auction for the letters and tapes. Julian Lennon quietly faded from public view after 1998. After years immersed in music, he felt a pull toward a different pursuit, one that didn't necessitate boisterous venues or large audiences. He was gradually enticed by photography. Everything changed in 2007 when he accompanied his younger half, brother Sean, on tour with his camera. Through the lens, he perceived the world in a different light. The world had previously opened up to him in a similar fashion. Julian was playing Australia in 1991, back in his salty days, when the song had dominated the charts there for a month. The Ming people, an indigenous group with long history, were his first encounters at that time. They invited him to assist narrate their narrative after receiving a white swan feather from their elders in Adelaide. This hit close to home for Julian. John Lennon, Julian's father, had previously told him that a white feather was a sign that everything will be all right. It felt like the sign was there in that time in Australia. Over the next 5 to 10 years, he intermittently used his camera to record Indigenous people's lives and tales. A documentary called Whale Dreamers was co-produced and narrated by him by 2006. The film highlighted the spiritual connection between the Ming people and whales. They weren't the only ones, though. The initiative became global, bringing together 80 Indigenous elders from different parts of the globe to share their stories of marginalization, abuse, genocide, and land loss. Editing was a challenge. Europe was Julian's location. Aussie Byron Bay was where the editor was at the time. Back then, working together was a real drag on the internet. Regardless, they persisted. After making it to a 2007 screening at Cannes, the film went on to win 8 accolades at various festivals. Julian dispersed the earnings. He returned them to the towns whose tales had dominated the television. A greater thing was about to start from that point on. He established the White Feather Foundation in Adelaide in 2007, which was named after the occasion. It was a broad yet straightforward mission: safe drinking water, quality education, aid for the environment, and preservation of Indigenous traditions. He explored every corner. He accompanied Scott Harrison from Charity Water on a mission to Ethiopia, where they witnessed fresh water being brought to villages through wells. As part of the United Nations Millennium Villages Project, he visited Kenyan schools and health centers. He visited the South American Kogi people. After 2008, even Prince Albert II of Monaco took notice and bestowed an award upon the foundation. More than 50 girls from the United States, the United Kingdom, and Africa have benefited from Julian's scholarship program since his mother Cynthia's death in 2015. I choose to keep my foundation small so I can focus on projects that other organizations ignore. A long-lost acquaintance of Julian's was re-established in 2009. As a child, Lucy Voden was a friend of mine, the same Lucy who appeared in Lucy Among Diamonds in the Sky. Lupus was taking her life at the age of 46. Julian was there for her in her last months, and in December of that year, he published a song named Lucy. Lupus organizations in the US and UK received half of the proceeds. On CBS, he sang the song live and shared a moving confession. After years of neglect, David Gilmour's collection finally included his long-lost original drawing of Lucy. The artwork for the song was approved by Gilmour. As a result of everything that happened, Julian was able to release his pent-up resentment toward his father. A sense of calm washed over me. Julian had already left the music industry's fast track by that point. After making friends with Prince Albert in Italy, he relocated to Monaco in 1991 and lived there for a while. He never started a family. In 2011, he expressed his worry about being a father due to his father's distant parenting style. Julian had always accused his father of being a hypocrite for preaching world peace while neglecting his own family. For the first time, he was able to fully embrace his father and the Beatles after recording Lucy, which allowed him put that grief behind. Julian continued to take pictures all through the 2000s. In 2010, the Morrison Hotel Gallery had his debut major exhibition. Included in the 35 images were the intimate moments with Shaw and Bono. During Art Basel Miami in 2012, he raised money for the foundation with his Alone series. Then came additional collections: Cycle in Los Angeles in 2016 and Horizon in New York in 2015. With moving shots of both humans and the earth, his photography created a visual journal of his charitable activities. The Aston Martin Residences Gallery in Miami displayed his work in 2021, making him the first fine arts photographer to do so. In 2023, 2 years down the road, he finally had his coffee table book out, Life's Fragile Moments, which collected photographs spanning 20 years and was sure to be a classic. Everything changes. Julian's first album since 1998's Photograph Smile was released in October of 2011. Julian shocked everyone by releasing a new album in 2011, despite previously declaring he was done with music. As he worked through his pain, he recorded roughly 30 songs in Los Angeles. This record was his favorite thus far, he said. It was less heavy, more genuine, with the addition of bonus tracks, including an Aerosmith duet with Steven Tyler titled Someday. He re-released the album in 2013 in order to generate money for children's organizations. The song used lyrics from Baby, You're a Rich Man. In a matter of days, Tyler and Lennon had collaborated on its writing. To celebrate 25 years of environmental action, Julian resurrected his classic song, Saltwater, in 2016 and released a new version. Featuring the same message, the remix featured an animated video that was hand-drawn. Earth need our utmost attention. Nothing had changed with the message, but everything else had. With the remix, the song was able to reach a younger audience and be heard on streaming services. As the globe came to a standstill due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Julian discovered a newfound passion for music. Prior demos were combed through by him and Justin Clayton. Surprisingly, a few were spot on. A chilling cover of Karma Police by Radiohead was also released in 2021, which he collaborated on with guitarist Nuno Bettencourt. Julian, then 57 years old, felt prepared for more that same year. His seventh studio album came after that. Jude, a reference to the Beatles song that Paul McCartney composed for Jude when he was 5 years old and his father had just left, was released on September 9, 2022. It wasn't until Julian's long, lost Realtor tapes and cassettes were found in a basement that the new record was born. Resuming his literary career, he digitized the content. People were talking about the Lucky Ones AI-powered commercial. The album delved into profound emotional realms. When Julian heard it was over, he sobbed. It was a sense of finality. However, there was some unrest in the past. After 16 long years of litigation, John Lennon's estate finally settled. Yoko Ono was left with everything by John. None of it went to Julian. After years of legal battles, he settled for about $25 million in 1996, a pittance compared to what he could have claimed. Unfortunately, Julian's letters to his father were among the personal belongings that John had preserved, and Yoko eventually auctioned them off. He was forced to repurchase them using the funds from his settlement. His photography hit a whole new level in 2023. New York's Photographiska hosted a big launch for life's delicate moments. Included in the book were portraits, landscapes, and even some rare practice footage of K.D. Lang and Sting. A striking photo featured Bono with a John Lennon portrait in the backdrop. Julian's prose gave each shot more nuance. Then an unforeseen development occurred. Love the Earth, an animated series based on Julian's Touch the Earth children's books, was in production by 2025. With first-rate animation and sound design, it had its premiere at SW London. Deepak Chopra, Sadie Frost, and King Charles himself were among the cast members who made an appearance at the launch. Stories from throughout the world, including indigenous peoples, endangered wildlife, and environmental lessons were part of the series. Reminiscence was Julian's second New York exhibition that year. The images brought attention back to Earth and the inextricable bond between humanity and the planet. They were intimate, poignant, and emotional. March and April were the exhibition dates at FMAN Gallery. Lastly, Julian's new extended play EP, because was released in October 2025. 4 songs were included, all taken from cassette demos that were made in the late 80s and early 90s. They underwent meticulous cleaning, remixing, and reanimation. A New Dream, one of the songs, has a music video that was entirely made by hand and took weeks to complete. Though he may have begun his career in his father's shadow, Julian had long since emerged from that position, and his songs, photographs, and gestures now spoke volumes more than his celebrity ever could.